is French Revolution time. I will oversimplify it and it will take me approximately 3 minutes. Let's go. So the 7 Years' War, aka the French and Indian War, happens. Then Britain raises taxes on its colonists because it had just fought a war to protect them. And the colonists are like, I will not. And also, while I am at it, let us fight for our independence. Thank you. And then they do. And then they only really won because of Spanish and specifically French involvement. So then what does France do? They raise taxes because they also just funded a war. You know that Third Estate is paying for all of this, please. And then Louis XIV is like, it's great to be king at Versailles with all my lavish parties. And the Third Estate are like, hey, we're like in a famine right now. Can you please just give us some bread? And he says no. And then Lafayette drafts a declaration of the rights of man and citizen. And then Louis is like, that's hilarious that you think your little National Assembly is going to take power away from me. And then Marat is like, hey, you want to test me? I'm going to write L'Ami du Peuple. This incendiary newspaper mobilizes people against the monarchy. And then the Poissade, the fish ladies, are like, oh, Louis, you think you can hide out there in Versailles? Also, the 60,000 of them as they march on Versailles steal a ton of bread and flour. And they bring Louis and Marie back to live at the Tuileries. Also, they're marching with like heads on pikes. It is at this point in 1791 when Louis is forced to sign the constitution that the National Assembly created. This establishes a constitutional monarchy in France. But then Louis and Marie try to flee France, and then Prussia and Austria ally with the monarchy because of Marie's mom. Then trying to flee was like a real bad move, and then Louis and Marie are stripped of their title and the French Revolution begins. And Robespierre says the birth of a new republic can only begin with the death of a king, and then the French are like, sweet, regicide. This was encouraged by the Jacobin faction because they say if the king is right, the revolution is wrong. Antoinette dies a lot later, and her story is actually quite sad, but the person who comes in power now is Robespierre. Also, by the way, France is like, hey, if we can do this here, everyone can do it everywhere in Europe, yeah! And then Robespierre gets increasingly more radical, and then everyone gets guillotined in the Reign of Terror. Also, these radical Jacobins, under specifically Jacques-René Hébert, try to de-Christianize France. Right, when they're removing the ancien regime, the old regime, they want to get rid of the political structures and also the religious structures in play. Hébert makes a new calendar that doesn't make a lot of sense. Then they create a new religion, the cult of the supreme being, and they worship the goddess of reason. I mean, a classic ode to Enlightenment philosophers right now. Specifically Voltaire, remember, because not only was he French, but he definitely spoke out against the Catholic Church and also the government. Wow. Robespierre dies via guillotine. And for 5 years in France, power is held between a very weak 5-man directory. But then there's this guy who's winning some battles, who becomes real important. And he's about to utilize the chaos of the French Revolution to take power for himself.